We are talking Baltimore Ravens football on the Ourlads Football Network. Thanks for tuning in as we are going to wrap up what has taken place over the last few days with cuts. Also, of course, take a look at the depth chart in the upcoming season. Tony Lombardi joining us once again from Russell Street Report. Of course, he's our Baltimore insider, and good to have you back again, Tony.
Always good to be here, Greg.
All right, Tony. So let's get into it. Let's talk about right now coming into next Thursday's big kickoff game. What's the primary concern for the Ravens as far as their team following training camp and preseason?
Well, I think if you ask most fans and even the guys that cover the team on a daily basis what the areas the team needed to address in the offseason, they'd probably say to a man that would be the offensive line and the edge rusher position. And they made a lot of changes to the team, drafted some decent rookies, but those positions are really, at this point, as unproven as they were when the team went into the offseason. So I just think that that's going to be their areas of weakness, particularly the offensive line. Greg, they lost 3 starters from last year, and you could argue that those 3 starters weren't the best guys on the planet when it comes to their positions, and I get that. They want to replenish that with a youth movement, but none of these guys that are going to step in have experience, and when you go and invest in a player like Derrick Henry, you'd like to think that that offensive front is going to be at least adequate, and right now the best you can say about that offensive line is it's unproven.
Is there one particular? I mean, of course, you look at that right side, and then you got a rookie there starting at right tackle, and the 2 guard spots. So those are the ones that obviously stick out. Is anyone further along than the other as far as those 3 are concerned?
I think Rosengarten is going to be a good NFL tackle. I think his technique is good. I think he has good hand positioning. The problem right now is you're going in the AFC North against 3 juggernauts that are edge rushers that like to come off that right side, the right offensive side.
Yep.
And those are Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, and Trey Hendrickson. And it remains to be seen how this guy Rosengarten can withstand a bull rush. So that's my concern there. At the guard position on that side, it's going to come down to Ben Cleveland or Daniel Falele. Falele's inexperienced at the position. Cleveland has been a guy that has flashed at times but has not shown any consistency. And at the other side, on left guard, is Andrew Voorhees, who missed last year because he blew out his ACL during the combines in 2023. And this is kind of his redshirt season. There's promise for him, but he's looked a little bit shaky at times in pass protection during the preseason.
All right. Well, it shows you how much pressure now it's on Ronnie Stanley and Tyler Linderbaum to stay healthy. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, there's one wild card in there, Greg, and that's Patrick McCarry.
Okay.
He's kind of like, I call him the Ravens' Kevin McHale. He's that 6th man. He's very versatile, can play any of the offensive line positions, and has done that for the Ravens. But I think when you look at this team as inexperienced as they are at offensive line, you got to put the 5 best offensive linemen on the line. And McCarry is one of those 5 and should be playing. I think he should start the season either at right guard or right tackle. But, you know, those guys have forgotten more about football than I'll ever know, Greg. So they're better than.
Yep. All right. Well, before we get to the defensive side, let's talk about the rest of the offense. Of course, you mentioned Derrick Henry. So how does that offense look with Derrick Henry so far in camp? Of course, preseason, I'm not sure what you can find out there, but with Henry and the overall scheme, you know, he's, I'm assuming, going to get a lot of touches. So how's that coming along?
Well, I think what you'll see early on, they may make a liar out of me on Thursday night, but I think they'll pace Henry because they want him to be strong in December and January. So, he's up there in age. Was he 31 now? Or 30? and that's getting long in the tooth for a running back. He's got a lot of wear and tear on the tires, so I think they're going to want to pace him a little bit. You'll see a lot more of Justice Hill, but after that, Greg, they're really thin at running back, and it wouldn't surprise me after game one that they go out and make a move for a veteran running back just to have some experienced depth there.
Okay. Yeah, because what's the injuries update, the latest? Taking a look at the reserves, Keaton Mitchell is definitely the biggest name on PUP. So what's his status?
He's gonna start the season on PUP. He'll at least miss the first 4 games. He had that injury was late November last year, so they're asking him to come back out on the field again in 2024. My guess is he won't see the field until mid to late October. And even then, Greg, you're probably not going to get the same Keaton Mitchell the first year after that ACL injury that you had before that ACL injury. And boy, what a dynamic 1-2 punch he and Derrick Henry could make.
Absolutely. And we'll see if Derrick Henry is still the same guy if he's here next year. But the end of the year, that's really counts as the most. But it is, as we all know, a very tough division. Anything can happen, 1 through 4. And one of the things I noticed, of course, was not just the fact that Baltimore has to start the season at Kansas City, but they also have a pretty tough schedule. I mean, they've got that typical, first place schedule, but it's as tough as I've seen.
It is a tough schedule, and schedules are a funny thing too. When you look at them to start the season, you can go and pick and choose, and maybe some gimme wins you throw in there aren't so much gimmies that when you get to those games, because teams do change and teams do improve. And as you've seen every year, there's always a couple of new participants in the postseason dance. So I wouldn't expect this year to be any different.
Okay. The rest of the offense, of course, with Mark Andrews coming back from injury, likely had a nice run when Andrews was out. So they're going to try to use a lot more of those two together on the field.
Yeah, that's the plan because, again, getting back to like what I was talking about, the offensive line, putting your best players on the field, likely is definitely one of their best offensive players. So they want to get the ball in his hands a lot more. He's really good after the catch, and he's got surprisingly deceptive speed, so he can get downfield, whereas Andrews can really command the boundaries, I mean, inside the hash marks and the numbers. So that's where he really shines the most. So having those two as a 1-2 punch will be a nice thing. And it really is dependent upon that offensive line too, how much they have to keep a tight end in to protect that inexperienced right side. So if they can get stable there, it'll make these two guys more dynamic weapons.
Zay Flowers had himself a nice rookie season. You take a look at the wide receiver core. Devontae Walker is the latest rookie. So again, we know how important the run game is and the tight end position for Baltimore. So it's not necessarily that important to have a deep wide receiver room based on the way this offense is run. Of course, you'd love to have everything, but you just can't nowadays. So that's just where the Ravens depth chart looks, and I think it's normal. So we know Flowers, what he can do. I don't know. I know he's had some off the field stuff, so I don't know if that's something we should talk about, if that's coming to play at all this season or during camp. But anything else regarding this wide receiver unit that you think is going to be on par with last year, better, more questionable? What do you think?
I think they'll be better than last year. Let's look at last year. OBJ didn't really do a whole lot. He brought some veteran leadership to the group, and probably helped Zay Flowers through his rookie campaign. I think that Rashad Bateman's a lot healthier now, the healthiest he's ever been as a Raven. He's got all the tools. He's just got to do it out there on the field. So the combination of those two guys, and Nelson Aguilar, he had a nice season last year as a number 3 guy. So the Ravens don't lean on number 3s a whole lot, but he did an adequate job. Had a few drops here and there, but did make some big plays as well. And then behind him, Tylan Wallace, he's coming on. He's looked a lot better as a receiver in training camp than he has, and also the preseason, than he has in past years. And he's a dynamic special teams guy, so he's pretty solid there. Beyond them, Devontae Walker, you mentioned him. He's been an absolute zero so far in training camp and in preseason. So, they said he needs to be more refined as a route runner and that he can take the top off of defense. Well, in order to take the top off of defense, you need to be able to run more routes than just a go pattern. And I think he struggles there. He's a big target. They hold a lot of hope for him, but so far he's shown absolutely nothing.
All right, let's go ahead and move on now to the defensive side. You mentioned the pass rush. So, you look at the depth chart, and I think, people could see, there's some good players there. Of course, the veteran Kyle Van Noy, but you got those two young kids, Owe and Ajabo. But it hasn't necessarily come along as well as the Ravens would have liked with those two kids. So where are they right now as far as their games?
Well, let's focus on Owe first. He's a guy who's got great physical attributes. He's fast, he's quick, he's mobile. He can, he's a smart kid. He just hasn't put it all together yet. And then he got a little nicked up last year. Chris Smith, the linebackers coach, has done a great job with those guys. And Owe looks the part right now. Until he does it on the field, we haven't seen a whole lot of him with pads on because he hasn't played the preseason. They've been protecting him, but he has the look of the part right now, and we'll see if he does it on Sundays. Ajabo's starting to come on a little bit during camp, but he's been so nicked up with big injuries over the last couple of years that it's hard to put a lot of faith in that. Anything you get from Ajabo, I think at this point is a bonus. Kyle Van Noy is out there, as is Tavius Robinson, and they're solid guys, but they're not that Jadeveon Clowney that they had last year, and they need somebody to step up and be that guy this year. Whether Owe or Ajabo can do that, it remains to be seen.
And the rookie, is it the third rounder, Isaac?
Yeah, he's only played in part of one preseason game. He had a hamstring injury coming out of the combine, so that kind of limited him. And then when that healed, his other hamstring started to flare up. So they've been, they call it a soft tissue injury. So they're protecting him a little bit. He's shown promise when he's been on the practice field, but haven't seen enough of him to really draw an opinion.
Okay, Patrick Queen is gone. So Trenton Simpson, is it his? Is that really is he the guy to look at to see what he can do to pick up the slack? We know how Roquan Smith is developing into one of the better linebackers, and he's already developed into one of the best middle linebackers in the game. But is that the deal that Trenton Simpson, he's going to be looked upon to try to pick up the slack from Patrick Queen leaving?
He is, and he's shown the part so far in camp and during preseason. He's had a really good preseason. He's got all the physical attributes that Patrick Queen had or has, and Roquan Smith is taking him as his underling. He's taking him and coaching him along. They've even gone on vacations together to get to know each other really well. So I think Roquan will help elevate Trenton Simpson's game more quickly than otherwise, just like he did with Patrick Queen. So I think they're good there. They're a little thin at the position after Trenton Simpson. There's Chris Board, who's more of a special teams guy, decent in coverage as a linebacker, but not much in the run game. And then there's Malik Harrison, who's been like their Swiss Army knife when it comes to linebackers. He's played on the edge, he's played in the middle, but after those guys, there's not a lot of depth to that inside spot.
Okay, so Tavius Robinson really just hasn't shown anything more than what, special teams?
No, he's been a good edge setter in the run game.
Okay.
He helps put some pressure on the quarterback, but really doesn't seem to get home all that much.
Okay. Up front, of course, Madubuike, he's turned into the big boy for the Ravens now. Michael Pierce just keeps playing, but as long as he's effective, why not? So how are they looking overall? And Travis Jones, everybody was excited about when the Ravens were able to get him in the third round a couple of years ago, and maybe that was a steal. I don't know how he's come along. So talk about the top three up front.
Well, I think there's been a passing of the torch, so to speak, or the baton when it comes to Michael Pierce and Trenton Jones, or Travis Jones. He's a guy that just the light bulb seems to be coming on. It flickered a little bit at times last year. Now I think it's engaged. I think you'll see a big season from him, and that third round steal that they thought they had, I think that will come to fruition this year. And playing alongside Justin Madubuike, they both have really good work ethics. And Madubuike is a guy who last year trained, really hard out in the LA area. And he was a guy that just put it all together. I mean, in the past, when he was younger, you hear guys like uh, the big Campbell, Calais Campbell. He
Yeah.
would say, how good this guy is. And I always look at professionals like Calais and listen to what they say from their experiences and their accomplishments. When they see something in a player and they vocalize that, I start to pay attention. And so I started watching Madubuike the year before last, and it was coming on. And last year it clicked. I kind of think the same path might be there for Jones as well.
All right. And then in the deep patrol, this is where you see a lot of the rookies. You got 4 rookies in the secondary. Also, Darius Washington is penciled in at nickel. Kyle Hamilton, of course, is matter of fact. We did our show last week on the Playbook Experts YouTube channel, so we were previewing. Actually, we're going over predictions for the 7 top awards in the NFL and looking at the futures and everything. And Kyle Hamilton was my pick for Defensive Player of the Year. So that's how much I respect Kyle Hamilton and what kind of player he could become, and maybe what he already is. But talk a little bit about those 4 rookies, including, of course, Bo Braid, who is the only college free agent rookie to make the team, which is not a surprise considering our lads had him graded as a round 3, round 4 prospect, which we talked about after the draft.
Yeah, it's he's really played well. They lost Geno Smith and needed a guy back there. And same thing with Sanusi Kane. He's played well on the back end as well in preseason and during camp. When the Ravens just have this way of finding these guys to play a certain role on their defense, and they did it with like Chuck Smith. Not Chuck Smith. The guy that went to the Jets.
Adams? No, not Adams.
No.
Yeah, Chuck Clark.
Right, Chuck Clark. They did it with him, and they did it with Geno Smith, and now it looks like the Bo Braid.
Geno Stone.
Geno Stone, and now it looks like Bo Braid is one of those guys, and Sanusi Kane might be one of those guys. So they seem to fill these things in. And to your point about Kyle Hamilton, they're so strong in the back end, and I think that's important to allow Hamilton to be that unicorn defender that he is. He's all over the field. He said in the offseason he was working with Chuck Smith to improve his pass rushing skills. Now, that goes to show you that they're going to use him all over the place. And the reason they can do that is because they do have strength in that defensive secondary, with Marcus Williams, A. Robinson's back there. You've got, as you mentioned, Darius Washington, Marlon Humphrey, and Nate Wiggins. He's the real deal. He can cover. He's got that cornerback moxie and confidence that you like to see, and he's not afraid to come up and make a hit. The knock on him is that he's so thin, and he's going to have to work on that conditioning in going into year 2. But, when he does come up and allow his natural instincts to be an aggressive defender to take over in the run game, he might be the last guy that gets up off the ground.
Okay, so you expect we'll see quite a bit of Wiggins then. And what about TJ Tampa? I know TJ Tampa had a really good college career. A lot of people thought that he was even a little bit of a steal in round 4.
Yeah, I think they're going to get value out of him, but it won't be this year. He's been through these groin injuries throughout camp, and has his time on the field has been very limited. So it would be hard to imagine that he'd be much of a contributor until later in the season, maybe after the first quarter of the season.
What would you consider the weakness in that secondary, or the biggest issue? Question.
I don't know that there is because Brandon Stevens is really coming on. He's in a contract year, and they've got plenty of depth. They've got Arthur Millette, who's going to be available to them in week 4. He's really fit in well with the Ravens. Darius Washington has played well in the secondary as a slot corner, and he can play even safety at times because that's kind of where he cut his teeth. So secondary is not an issue, and they've got depth there too. And it would not surprise me when Arthur Millette comes back, which is expected in, I guess, game 5. That's around the time that the trade deadline starts to creep in, and maybe the Ravens deal from a position of strength to get stronger in another area if offensive line plays out the way I think it could.
And under John Harbaugh, we understand how important special teams is. So it's no surprise that this is one of the better units in the league, or at least you would imagine it's going to be, especially the kicking game. And then you add in Deontay Hardy. So any reason to believe that this won't be one of the top units?
No, there's no reason not to believe that they'll be among the top units because, like you said, John Harbaugh cut his teeth in special teams, and he emphasizes that a lot in practice. So I expect them to be right there. They've got a great kicker, a great punter, and their whole operation with the long snapper. Nick Moore is spot on. So I think they're good. That kickoff though, it's going to be really interesting. And I'm not convinced that Deontay Hardy is going to be a guy that's going to have much of an impact. And the reason I say that is because he's been a little nicked up in camp. Haven't seen much of what he can do as a punt returner. And in the kick return game, I don't know what you're taking away from watching those returns, Greg, but it seems to me that running backs do better than the traditional, speedster kind of kick returners.
That's not a bad thought there. It's also hard to tell because of the fact that you just get the impression that most of the coaches are just waiting for the regular season before they implement anything that they really want to use. We've seen so many kickoffs in the end zone, and let's just take it out to 30. Well, I'm not so sure that's what's going to happen. Matter of fact, because it's funny, because I was watching some of the, obviously I'm watching some of the Jet games, and I'm seeing a lot of kickoffs in the end zone. And then I was watching some of the practices, and I'm watching the practices, and Zerlin's kicking it within the 5-yard line. Like, wait a second, how come I'm not seeing that in the preseason game? So it's like, you wonder, and I'm sure that's going around the rest of the league. It's like, well, we're not going to show you when we are going to kick it inside the 5 or the 10 as much as we probably are, because we're not going to give you our game plan. But it is interesting, and I think we're all just waiting to see on next Thursday, what it really looks like and how it really is going to affect the game at all, because I don't think it's really affected it much in the preseason, but I do think that your idea of how a running back might work back there, I think that's a good one, because I'm starting to see a lot of the teams in the NFL, especially even this last draft cycle, drafting running backs with kick returning experience. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that they knew that this rule was going to be in place.
Yeah, it seems like a running play when you watch it develop. No one moves except the kicker until someone receives the ball. And I agree with you. They probably are not showing their hand just yet in the preseason. But my guess with this is that teams will advance the ball beyond the 30-yard line fairly regularly. And when they do, what's going to happen? They're going to kick it into the end zone.
Yes. Anyway. Yes, exactly. So we'll see if this even becomes a factor at all this season. A couple of remaining things. 9 rookies end up making the Ravens. That seems a lot for a team that was the number 1 seed in the AFC last year. Is that a lot for Baltimore, or no? That's they usually get a lot of rookies to come in because they lose a lot of free agents.
Yeah, that's the idea. If you can get I don't mean to diminish the value of these players, but cheaper labor to help them manage the salary cap while they have to afford the money to pay these superstars that they have. So when you got that coming into play, the less expensive talent that can do the job. I think I heard Steve Bisciotti once say the 80-20 rule. I'll take 80% of someone's production for 20% of the price.
That's that's
kind of how it's a loosely managed rule of thumb, but you think about it, it makes sense because you have to have those producing rookies, because if you don't and you have one of those high paid salary players underperforming, not playing to the value of their contract, that starts to hurt your salary cap a lot.
Anyone we need to keep an eye on the practice squad?
One of my favorite players this spring or this summer has been Dayton Wade. And when you look at him coming out of Ole Miss has a knack for producing receivers in the NFL. And I think he's got all of the natural instincts of a football player and receiver. He performs well on the boundary with his footwork. He's got good hands. He's got good moves. He's got a nice lateral movement and acceleration out of his breaks. He put a move on against Philadelphia for a touchdown. I think it was about a 48-yard connection that the cornerback tried to catch him as he was going by him because he did like a stop and go that was just so beautifully executed. So he's on the practice squad. He's my favorite guy on the practice squad, and I think you'll see him on the field before the season's out.
And anyone as far as the reserves right now, besides Mitchell and Mollett, that will be a part of this team, an integral part?
Well, we talked about the weaknesses across the offensive line, and Corey Bullock and Darian Dalcourt, they both performed well during the preseason and in camp. So it would not surprise me to see one of those two guys get elevated at some point during the season.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on those other two on the practice squad. And Devin Leary is also on the practice squad, the former North Carolina State and Kentucky quarterback. So not sure we'll see him. Doesn't seem like a natural fit for the way the Ravens like to have their backup quarterbacks. They all like to have them kind of resemble Lamar Jackson. Josh Johnson, I think he's on his like 24th team in the last 6 years. So you got to love that. It's funny because, he actually does a good job when you see Josh Johnson play in limited time. Like if he's out there for like a quarter or something like that, you're like, hey, this guy's not bad.
Right.
So it's probably not the worst idea.
John Harbaugh is a big supporter of Josh Johnson's. And I tell you, when camp first started, Lamar was sick for I think the first 3, 4, 5 days of camp, and Josh Johnson was running against the ones with the #1 offense, and he looked terrible. And then he got into their first preseason game, looked even worse. And then against the Eagles, not against the Eagles, against the Falcons, he just lit it up. He looked great. And so there's a lot of confidence from his teammates and the coaching staff of Josh Johnson. But like a lot of teams in the NFL, Greg, if your quarterback goes down, you're in trouble.
And that division is well aware of that, probably more than any division over the last several years, with the Lamar Jackson injuries. And then when he's healthy, he's winning MVPs. Joe Burrow, look what happens when he's healthy and when he's not. Look at the Browns with Deshaun Watson, and all their quarterbacks started last year. So it's such a tight division that's really that's what's going to impact who finishes first, who makes the playoffs or not, is the health of these teams.
Yeah, you mentioned the Browns, and you probably saw yesterday that they restructured Deshaun Watson's contract. They turned his salary into a bonus, and they're going to stretch it out and kick the can down the road a little bit more with his salary cap numbers. But they freed up, I think, $45 million in that transaction in salary cap space. So now they have like $62 million. When I read that, I thought the Browns are going to get Ayuk. I could see it coming now. It didn't happen. So yeah. I don't know why they had to clear up all that cap space to this late in the game. You know what I mean? Like what's out there that they want to do?
I don't know. We'll have to see. But yeah, that is interesting, no question. And they've done a really good job, the management of the Browns. Just the fact that they were able to make the playoffs with all those quarterback injuries just shows you that if they have a healthy Deshaun Watson, and you know more than anybody, Tony, because this is the one thing when I've had some people criticize Deshaun, and I'm not saying he's not criticizable, if that's a word, but the fact is that I've kind of defended him because all you have to do is turn on the tape of that Baltimore game when he had a broken bone in his shoulder and a high ankle sprain. And he still was 14 of 14 in the second half, willed his team to victory when he could have easily quit and said, I've got a broken bone in my shoulder. I've got a high ankle sprain. I'm a $200 million quarterback. I am sitting down. I'm not playing. He didn't do that. He showed you how tough the kid is. He did that also in college. Same similar situation. He's playing with like some broken ailments, and he still played the entire game. The kid's a tough kid. He's a talented kid. If he could stay healthy, Cleveland's going to be very dangerous.
That was a really great display of football character for Deshaun Watson in that game against the Ravens. If you recall, I think it was his first pass of the game. Kyle Hamilton on a blitz came in and batted the ball up in the air, caught it, and took it in for a touchdown.
Okay.
And so you've got all of that going. In the injury, the fact that the first pass was a pick six. That's his wherewithal in that game was impressive, I admit. Now, can he do that on a consistent basis?
Yep.
Well, that's the big question mark. And his injuries are a factor as well. So we'll see. I mean, it's hard for me to root for a guy with the off the field stuff.
I know,
but I have to admit that just like you, I was impressed with that gutty performance in that game.
And what's your take on Pittsburgh?
I think they'll go as their quarterbacks go. They're going to start Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Mike Tomlin says he's going to get him involved in the games from the jump, whether there's certain packages for him. I think both of those quarterbacks could be bust, and the Steelers are going to have to be in the same situation next year. But I know that they're hoping that they figure out a way of making one of those two guys work, because if they can,
yeah,
they're going to be in the mix.
Yeah, that's what you love about the NFL.
Right.
Is you never know. There's a bunch of teams out there that have a shot if everything goes well, and of course you stay healthy. All right, Tony, awesome job as always. Thanks for doing this. I look forward to talking to you hopefully during the season, especially if the Ravens have another one like they did last year. I'm sure it's Super Bowl or bust for the fan base. So we'll see. We'll see if Todd Monken gets the benefit of the doubt at any point this season. I'm sure that's a story to watch. But overall, it should be another fun season to report on the Baltimore Ravens for 2024.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it, and it starts on Thursday night.
Yep, Tony, great job. And again, don't forget, everybody, Russell Street Report. Check it out for all the best in Baltimore Ravens coverage. And we'll talk more Baltimore Ravens football with Tony Lombardi later this season on the Ourlads Football Network.